we come to three categories. And one of them is apparition, which is the term that's been used since the 1800s, late 1800s, for consciousness surviving the death of the body. So what people often think of as a ghost, a spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it. The word ghost, unfortunately, in different cultures, even we're using it in English, you find different people have different ideas. So we tend to use the word apparition because it's a little bit cleaner. And then people ask what that means. So there we're talking about people after death, although you can have apparitions of living people too. And then there are what are called hauntings. And I think they do the reality TV shows are not great in a lot of ways. But one of the things they did do is give a sort of definition to this idea of what a haunting is. And that's what they call a residual haunting. We just use the word haunting for that. The idea is that human activity, and sometimes other kinds of activity, the information about that activity is somehow recorded in the environment. And some people, many people sometimes, can pick that up, and it gets kind of a playback in our heads, in our perceptions. So think of it as a recording of human activity, and then some people who are sensitive enough, it gets added to our normal perceptions, and we might think we're seeing a ghost or a figure doing the same thing over and over again. These are the things where the ghost seems to be doing things in repeated pattern. Like every night there is footsteps down the hall. I like to say, well, every night at midnight on this castle in Scotland, the old lord of the manor who died 100 years ago plays his bagpipes. And if you waited for that to happen on the parapet, and the figure is approaching you, and you tried to ask him a question, like, do you take requests? And he stops and just reacts to you, that would indicate a conscious entity, like, somebody who's conscious. But if he keeps going, like a recording, because we can interact with videotape. The other thing about hauntings that's really important, even the folks in the paranormal ghost hunting world don't even think about this, is that these recordings, these environmental things, can be just purely emotional. Most people have experienced, anytime they've gone house hunting or apartment hunting, you've probably experienced something where you walked into a place and said, ooh, this doesn't feel good, or this feels really good. Mm-hmm. You may be picking up on the emotions of the people who are living there.
I've definitely had that happen before.
Yeah, I mean, it's something almost everybody experiences, and that's same kind of thing. It's just not more than emotional information. Otherwise, living people leave impressions behind. Hauntings have nothing to do with the dead any more than a movie from the 1930s has anything to do with dead actors. They were alive when they made the recording. We can still watch it. That's a haunting. So we have hauntings sometimes of living people. In fact, I've had a couple of people over the years tell me that they were freaking out because they got home. And in one case in particular, the guy said he came into his house and it was after dark. He came home from work and he starts turning on the lights and he sees down a darkened hallway a figure, and he thinks there's somebody who was an intruder. But as the figure came closer to them, he recognized himself. And that freaked him out more than probably any other ghost or even intruder might have done. So the term poltergeist goes back at least as far as the 16th century in Germany. And it was applied for a particular type of what they thought was supernatural activity. In most ghost cases or apparition cases, people see somebody or hear a voice or something like that. And there's almost never any physical activity. Poltergeist phenomena is about generally purely physical activity. Nobody sees or experiences an entity, although there are a couple of exceptions to that for good reason. But it's physical activity. And what we have learned in the 20th century is that there's typically a living person, an epicenter, a living agent who is at the center of the physical activity that's unexplained. And usually that person is responsible for it, even though they're unaware that they're responsible for it. So we all have this ability kind of to some extent called psychokinesis or mind over matter. And under certain conditions, certain people, the stress, it's usually emotional, psychological stress, or there's a segment of poltergeist agents that are neurologically bound. It's connected to something else in the brain. But they kind of think of it as blowing off steam, a telekinetic temper tantrum, kind of like in the movie Carrie that was out there years ago. Yeah. But it's their unconscious that's doing that. And usually it's because they have something going on and they have no other outlet to blow off steam. This is the one phenomena that we know involves living people. because we've been able to often identify who that person is and changing the situation for them, helping them relieve stress through counseling or through other means, like blowing off steam a different way, stops the phenomena. So we can say that we have done the scientific method and hypothesis tested of who it is, why it's happening, providing some outlets, and the phenomena stops.